Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Stop Doing Nothing podcast with Patrick Allman. This is the podcast for high achievers. If you are someone who is wanting to be more productive in your personal life, exercise more, make more money, or just improve your position in life, then this is the perfect podcast for you. For more information, please visit our website at stopdoingnothing.com. Now, sit back, relax, and listen to episode 18, which is part 2 of a two-parter where we talk to Tim Priebe of TNS Online Marketing in Oklahoma City about how to start and run a successful online marketing company. Actually, you may have indirectly answered this next question.
I can directly answer it too.
Is that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that can work from home take advantage of it, and they drag their feet getting up in the morning, and they waste time, and they're not very strict about that. When your alarm goes off in the morning, I'm assuming you have an alarm, what motivates you to actually get up and go to work versus just pressing snooze and sleeping in for another hour?
Right. For me, the magic moment that happened was because we ran TNS out of the house for a while. I don't think technically we were supposed to have employees coming to the house.
Right.
I found out later. I didn't know at the time, but I found out later. And so, but I was kind of lazy at the beginning when I first started. Now, part of that was I was reacting to what I shared earlier, where I didn't have time for my kids, I didn't have time for anything.
Right.
And so, but it was definitely an overreaction.
Right.
And so I certainly had that issue at home. For me, what made the difference was when I got an office.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, it felt more like a real job.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll have days where I dress down and days where I dress up. This is kind of my mid-level. I'm wearing a long-sleeve button-up shirt untucked with jeans.
Mm-hmm.
That's my middle-of-the-road outfit when I meet with people I know, or I'm going to be on a podcast where nobody will see me. But I certainly have my completely writing programming days where I'll be in t-shirt and shorts or t-shirt and jeans.
Right.
And then I have my all meetings all day, or if I'm speaking somewhere, where I'm in a button-up long sleeve shirt and slacks or khakis.
Right.
But for me, actually leaving the office and going somewhere else is what made the difference. Now, I know that doesn't work for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Some people that would make no difference. Some people have no problem at home.
Right.
But for me, that's what made the difference, was actually getting up, leaving the house, and going somewhere, and being accountable to other people for being there at a certain time.
Okay.
Right. So we have, like you and I, right? I had to be here at 9 a.m. This morning to meet you.
Yes.
I was accountable to you. But literally just being accountable to clients, because we now have set office hours that they expect to receive support during.
Okay.
And so having those and being here to answer the phone, although I'm not typically the one that answers the phone now.
Right.
But just that accountability, right? So physically leaving and then the accountability were the two things that helped me the most.
Got it. Okay. Looking at what's kind of made your company the most successful, and again, I think we briefly touched on this, and it's your ability to come up with other solutions for people. Mm-hmm. Can you think of any one particular thing or one particular area that your clients really love that has made you the most successful?
Certainly in recent years, it has been our management of blogging, social media, and newsletters.
Okay.
Now, management doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. When we talk about management, it typically means we will create content on a regular basis for those platforms, and if anything weird happens online, we'll take care of it. That always happens.
Right.
But when Facebook changes something or MailChimp changes something, we will be poised to help them act quickly to either recover from or take advantage of whatever the change is.
Right.
And so just the aspect that so many people, just like you were sharing, and now I can't remember if it was in this podcast. We just recorded my podcast too. But you were sharing that, it was the previous. So you had shared that podcasting was a great avenue for you because you're not nearly as comfortable writing. You're thinking faster than you can type.
Right.
That or some related problem is not unusual for people, right?
Okay.
They have trouble writing because they think faster than they write, or they just find it to be literally a painful experience. You and I, mutual acquaintance, Jimmy Owens with Design Tunnel, we help him with his blogs, and he wrote great blogs. Like before he came in and we were assisting him, he wrote fantastic blogs.
Right.
But what he shared with me is that it was just a painful process for him.
That's
and
just
so,
about the way it feels with me too.
Yeah, and then there's people who it's not a painful process for, but it's just they don't like the final product that they did, or it's not painful, they just can't find the time.
Right.
But it seems like the key was actually writing for people.
Okay.
Now they have to take care of the conversations themselves, and we have a distinction of what's marketing versus what's sales.
Right.
And so we say once there's a conversation, we view that as, and not everyone does, but we view that as more of a sales activity, and think that they need to jump in at that point,
right,
and take care of that conversation. But from a marketing standpoint, just they're okay. Typically, they're okay at that point, right? It's actually being consistent and writing that they just weren't, they didn't have the time or expertise to do, and then being poised to take quick advantage of those changes when they occur, or overcome whatever effect the changes had. And certainly Facebook is one of the most notorious, even though they're not the worst.
Right.
They have the biggest user base, and so you get the most people complaining when Facebook makes a change, and so we're able to help them through that.
I think 1 billion plus people probably whine every single time if they make a change. I'm really interested in the way that you run things and the lessons you learn, because if you sound like someone like me who's always doing introspection, if that's a word.
Reflection.
Reflection, thank you.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. And that's, that actually sounds like a .NET programming term, reflection and introspection.
Yeah.
If you were to go back and talk to your former self, like the first day you started in business, because it's been 11 years and a month now, basically, what advice do you wish that you could go back to yourself and give yourself on the first day of business? First day of full-time business, because you were part-time first.
Right. Well, I know there's a couple things I would tell myself. Number one is go ahead and get an office out of the house sooner than I did. Because for me, now I don't know that there was any way I could have known that.
Right.
But that would be one of the pieces of advice I would give myself. Two other pieces of advice that occur to me immediately. Number one is don't go into debt.
Right.
Now, for us, that's for some companies that's fine. They go into debt, they pay it. For us, we're not. That made it sound like we're not repaying our debt. But we would have had more freedom. I should have done like I'm doing now with the writers, right? Where you build it up to the level that financially it's like, okay, now I will transfer that money from here to here. And I certainly got to know, there were certain points where we were overstaffed. We had more staff than we really needed, with levels of experience that were probably not appropriate for what we were having them do.
Right.
It all worked out okay, except that we went into much more debt than I would like to be into.
Right.
So that would be my second piece of advice would be don't do everything in your power to not go into debt.
Right.
And then the third piece of advice, one area that I used to be lazy in was, we were talking about natural talents earlier. I would coast on those natural talents instead of working to improve them.
Right.
And so the third and final big key piece of advice I would give myself would be start working on those talents now. So that's why I joined, and we're both in the National Speakers Association together. That's why I joined that organization. That's why I started actually working on my talks rather than I thought it was cool to make up a new one every time.
Been there, done that.
And so, but actually working on and honing my talks, working on my writing and making it an intentional thing rather than when the mood struck. Prior to this year, I had written a couple of books. But we'll just put it this way. I published 2 books this year.
Right.
So my third and fourth book. I don't like to show people my first 2 books anymore. I mean, for one thing, they're just not accurate because how I wrote them, they were very technology based. But for another thing, they're just not. My writing was not the high caliber that I've made myself do. I also do a column here in Edmond for the Business Times, published by the Edmond Sun. So a monthly column in a magazine, actual printed magazine.
Wow, very cool.
And so agreeing to do that meant all of a sudden I had a word count, which I'd never had before. But so just doing different things like those things. I've also, well, you know Mike Crandall.
Right.
And he's actually I think he calls it the principal at Sandler Training here in Oklahoma
City, right?
Oklahoma City. And so, but also developing, I had some natural sales skills,
right?
But actually joining a program like that that had accountability built in, had training built in,
nice.
Had ongoing education built in, not just let's go to a seminar and then all right,
walk away kind of thing.
Yeah, or you walk away pumped up and excited, but then the implementation doesn't happen, or it happens and then you burn out. Or
huge
whatever.
problem with any kind of training and sales seminar stuff.
But working on all that stuff and investing time, money, energy, effort in improving the things I was good at.
Right.
That's the third piece of advice I would give myself is start working on that. I wish I had started working on that sooner rather than about 2.5, 3 years ago.
Gotcha. Now, this is along the same lines of that questioning, but you may have another additional tidbit or two to add.
Okay.
If you were asked to speak at, like OSU or OU, and you were speaking to a group of students who's getting ready to graduate, and they are completely in awe of the work that you've done with TNS, because entrepreneurship seems like the coolest thing in the world.
Sure.
You fly around the world in jets. You have assistants that take care of your every need. They fill your coffee cup. They know when it's empty. What extra advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about starting a business? Besides what I've heard some people say, like, don't go into business. But what extra advice would you give to people that want to start a business like you did?
Oh, so at different points, I'm sure I would give different advice, and that this may not be the advice I give even a year from now.
Right.
But right now, my advice for them would be, we've all heard this saying. I say we all have. But there's no such thing as luck. It's really when preparation meets opportunity.
Right.
Well, for me, what that preparation is, and should have been this whole time for me, but I'm a little slow, just now getting a handle on it, is figuring out where you want to be. So in 5, 10 years, what activities will that person that you will be then be doing on a daily basis? Most of those activities, it turns out, are not monetary based or success based. They're things you can start doing now.
Right.
And so taking those behaviors that you will be engaging in, go ahead and figure those out. And they may change over time, and you may not have been completely accurate.
Right.
But start doing those things now. And make the time. Don't make excuses. And that's easy for me to say, right? Ready, fire, aim.
Right.
But it turned out I had to do a little aiming and figure out what that person actually looked like.
Right.
And then actually start doing them and be consistent. And when you do those behaviors, don't focus on the results.
Right.
Because like we just talked about in the podcasting, in the previous podcast, you may not get that success early on.
Right.
And so you may not see your business double or triple or, in the first month or 2 or year or 5 years.
Right.
But focus on how doing what you set out to do makes you feel about yourself.
Okay.
Focus on that feeling.
Interesting.
And so reinforce it internally by knowing, hey, I just went for, so this morning, I just started a new morning routine the day after Christmas. We're recording this on, I don't know what today is. Today is
29th.
the 29th.
Right.
So I've only been doing this for 4 days now.
Right.
But I said, hey, I'm gonna start some new morning habits when it's a challenge to start them.
Right.
So that later when it's easier, it's not as big of a deal.
Right.
And so I woke up the day after Christmas, and we were down in Dallas, and so it was 50-something degrees. Went for a walk.
Okay.
Did some other activities, but I went for about a 3-4 mile walk. The next day it was 40-something. I said, okay, I'll still do this.
It's a brave man.
The next day it was 30-something. Still did it. This morning it was 28 degrees when I set out for my morning walk.
Right.
I didn't pass a lot of people this morning on my walk, but I did it. Now I've set a personal cutoff for myself. Below 25, I'm not going for a walk.
Okay.
And if it's icy, I'm not going for a walk because I will be the guy that falls on his butt or cracks his head open or whatever the case is.
Right.
And so, but I got to stick within those parameters I've established for myself. So it was 28 degrees.
Right.
So I went for a walk this morning. And so just staying consistent, but how it's made me feel. Have I got results in the past 4 days? Well, no. I've been walking for 4 days.
Right.
I've been journaling consistently on the schedule I want to for 4 days. I've been praying, doing a daily prayer for 4 days.
Right.
The results haven't come, but how I feel about myself was there immediately.
Right.
And so concentrating on, hey, I feel good, and so when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m.,
Right.
how does this activity make me feel? And so that's what I would tell those students.
Habits? It sounds like habits.
Yeah, I mean, it's building a habit, but for reinforcement, don't rely on external sources for reinforcement.
Okay.
Rely on how it makes you feel, because that's internal. You're not relying on something else, because
Right.
again, the whole point is form these habits that are completely dependent on you.
Right.
Right? Behaviors that are dependent on you, not the results, and get the reinforcement out of internal things, not the external results, because then it's guaranteed, if you've picked good habits,
Right.
it's guaranteed to enforce itself.
Interesting. I love that one. I'm going to go back myself on the podcast, listen to it a couple of times to reinforce that. One of the other questions that we're down to towards the end of the questions I had here, I was curious, because I think our listeners would want to know, when you spend, there are certain websites that I have bookmarked online that I go to read up on industry news and marketing trends and what's going on with social media and certain people I follow. Do you have any, maybe 3 to 5, that you could recommend, websites that you like going to catch up on trends in the world of marketing or in your business?
So I tend to read, my nonfiction reading is divided into 3 areas.
Okay.
Biographies, and
Okay.
I'm always going to get lessons that I can apply, but mostly biographies are not for business.
Right.
So biographies, and then marketing related books, and then just bigger picture business related books.
Okay.
And I'm saying books because on the marketing side, on the online reading side of things,
Right.
it tends to be more news stuff.
Okay.
Like this is current, this just happened on Facebook, there's this algorithm change on Google, those type of things. Now I will read some business articles on Inc. From time to time. That tends to be one of the websites I'll go to. So I have all my different areas of the online marketing and the different sources I read.
Right.
And then I filter all that because I want, every person tends to be biased on their own expertise, right? You talk to a LinkedIn expert, and of course you have to be on LinkedIn.
Right.
Or you talk to someone who runs email newsletters on MailChimp. And they're like, no, you have to use MailChimp. MailChimp's the only option.
Right.
Or whatever. I tend to be much more agnostic than that.
Right.
But I still pick those experts because they are experts on the specific platforms. And so I have a variety of places I go. So I'll do Moz for SEO.
Okay.
And I'll tend just to go off their email newsletter and scan through that and see which articles were good. I will do, and I'm going to forget some of the sources. For a lot of the social media, I do Social Media Examiner.
Okay.
Is a good source. I will read. I have a couple of go-to WordPress sites that are escaping me right now.
Okay.
But a lot of it, I'll just read through the coming developments and kind of filter that list through myself.
Right.
And it's funny because they'll just have all the bulleted items, and a lot of times there will be one bullet item that just really excites me that
Right.
nobody else out there cares about at all. So I find if I just go to the news sites about that, it tends to not always be what I care about in WordPress. And of course, there's some other sources
Right.
as well, but those are the typical ones. I know there is another general online marketing one that I can't remember, and it may come to me. I'm opening up my browser to see if I can pull it up real quick because I know I have some unmarked emails from them. But it's not. It's one in addition. There's one other one in addition to Social Media Examiner.
Okay.
This is probably going to go too slow, but I can get that to you later. Do you do show notes or something?
I can do show notes in the blog post afterwards. So
I'll get that to you.
when we originally started answering this question, you talked about books, and
Yeah.
one of the things I noticed when I did walk in is you do have a very full bookshelf over there of business books.
Yes.
And you feel free to stand up and walk over there and look to answer this question because we have a really good microphone.
Okay.
But if you were to pick 1 or 2 books, no, let's say 3. Over on your bookshelf, if your place was burning down and your wife said you had to grab 3 books Besides worrying about the insurance claim, which 3 books would you grab off of your bookshelf?
Okay, so I've got to think, because now I tend to buy Kindle books now.
Kindle counts.
Kindle counts, okay. Fortune Cookie Principle.
Okay.
In fact, that's the only book I've bought where I bought multiple copies for people.
Okay.
So Fortune Cookie Principle is a huge one. There are some... I would want to pick one of the Seth Godin books, and I can't think now of which one I would pick.
Not the Purple Cow one, is it?
I don't know which one it would be.
Okay.
I've read so much of his stuff for enough years now that it just seems ingrained, though.
Right.
That some of it's for granted, but he was really a pioneer. Okay, and for the third one, sorry, I am going over.
It's okay. It's amazing how much your bookshelf looks just like my bookshelf. I see Good to Great. I see John Jance's Orange Gear book over there. I see Get Seen.
Yeah, I would.
There's some. Are there any Sandler books over there?
My Sandler books are right by my computer.
Okay.
Well, and in fact, once we go, I'm turned away from the mic. I apologize. Once we go outside of the area of online marketing,
right?
I would do. You can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar.
Got that one. Good book.
And so that's probably the next one. The other, and actually Sandler's publishing a lot more now. They had, for a long time, they just had 2 other books. But the other 2 are kind of more into detail. But you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar.
Right.
For my sales role, when I read that, I was at a point where I was pretty frustrated with all the other sales reading I was doing. And that was an area where I was looking to improve myself. Right. And so I was reading a number of other books, and I would take like one nugget out, and I would say, I can't do the rest of this crap. This is, and this is just my interpretation, but I was like, this is sleazy. I don't want to do this sleazy stuff. If this is what getting myself better at sales means, then I guess I don't want to. Right. Then I read You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar, or the bike book, as they call it in Sandler. Right. Once you're in Sandler, that's what they call it. The bike book. Right. But, and it stood well. Number one, it stood well on its own. Okay. So anyone that feels like, I don't want to get in the Sandler cult or whatever it is. Right. No, just pick up this book and read it. Okay. And it was interesting because it both combined... David Sandler, the guy that started Sandler, he's been dead a number of years now, but it was his story. So he was telling the core original principles, but surrounding it with the story of what he experienced. Okay. And so that appealed to my biography reading side and my business book reading side, and then the fact that I was specifically focusing on sales. So yeah, that would be a huge one, especially for anyone that I know there's a lot of people that don't like to self-promote themselves or their stuff. They don't want to come off as being salesy, and I'm certainly one of those people. Right. I did air quotes there for the podcast listeners, salesy. And I don't like that. I don't like coming off like that. But really, you're talking about coming off sleazy. Right. Is what you're saying. And so we've unfortunately associated that with salespeople. But
comes back, I think, from the door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman, high-pressure stuff back in the day.
Right. And any high pressure, and really, and even now. But so yeah, that one changed my complete view of what. I mean, the other books, it was like 2%. Right. Maybe I would gain one nugget out of them. This book, maybe 2% I didn't agree with right away. Interesting. And so all the rest of it was, Dave Ramsey has this saying, it's advice your grandmother would give you, only we keep our teeth in, or something like that. I felt like that's what, once I read through the Sandler book, I was like, that's really, most of it was common sense. I just hadn't thought of it like that before. Right. And in fact, that's funny. I've heard people not engage with Sandler because they say, well, you just teach common sense. Well, it turns out common sense is not that common.
Common sense isn't. That's the phrase I like to put.
Yeah. So anyway, and I appreciate you reminding me about that, because that would definitely be up there in my top 3.
I've read it. I need to read it again. I was going on a cruise 2 or 3 years ago, and on my way out of town, I stopped by the Sandler office, picked up 2 books to take on the plane ride to Florida, and those are the 2 books. That book and another Sandler book are the ones I took with me on the cruise. Okay. I only took 2 books with me on the cruise, and so I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean reading Sandler books. Nice. So that was a very, very good choice there. I have one more question on a list of questions, and this went very well. We're taking up plenty of time. All of a sudden I noticed, this may have been a year ago or 6 months ago, I don't know the exact time frame, but you started painting. And that kind of surprised me and shocked me there. It's like, why is this web design guy painting? I thought you were going to abandon TNS at some point. And so can you explain, how did you get into that? And what's your goal with that? Is this are we going to see some stuff in some museums eventually from you?
Oh, I don't know about that. Well, I had always admired painting. When you got here to my office, I walked you through and showed you all the paintings. All of our designers, except our very first one, because he was gone when we started this, but have painted a painting that we had here at the office. And that was actually, I mentioned the art show we had last year at the Fine Arts Institute of Edmond. And we had those paintings, and then had some clients, and we had some past employees bring in paintings and photography and that sort of thing. So I've always had this appreciation, and always thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool? But I never had what I would call a natural talent in the area. Well, my kids are big Minecraft fans, so it's a video game. I won't go into too much detail.
Explain something all of a sudden, right?
But yeah, it's actually now the #1 selling game on PC.
Wow.
And in fact, the guy that started it just bought the most expensive home ever sold in Beverly Hills.
Wow.
So interesting stuff. And Microsoft now just recently bought it. From the parent company. So anyway, but they play this game called Minecraft.
Okay.
So last year, because we love the Fine Arts Institute, my now 8-year-old, I guess he was 6 turning 7, had his birthday party at the Fine Arts Institute, and they were painting Minecraft characters. And 2 of the kids didn't show up, and I thought, 2 of the kids didn't show up for the birthday party, and I thought, well, I'm not going to let this setup go to waste.
Right.
So I sat down and started painting with the kids. Now, how this worked was there was a grid on the canvas, and if you're familiar with Minecraft, there was a creeper. We were painting creeper faces.
Okay.
So there was a grid on the canvas, and we were just filling in with different shades of green, and then there were certain spots that had to be black for the mouth and eyes, and then we were done. And the way Minecraft worked, they were really big squares.
Right.
So I'm in there, and all the kids have gone, and they're opening presents, and my wife's getting irritated at me, and I'm still in there painting this Minecraft guy. So my mind started racing. Of course I was paying attention also to the rest of the party.
Of course.
But my mind started racing. This is something I've always wanted to do, and I just figured out a system that could merge my enjoyment of 8-bit things, right? Video game culture, and that sort of thing, with my enjoyment, the thing I've always wanted to do, which was painting. Now, typically I'll get a cash infusion around Christmas time.
Right.
And so I thought, well, hey, I'm going to invest some of that money in setting myself up to paint. And I'm going to paint one painting a month, an average of a painting a month, so that I can really give it a shot and see if this is something I enjoy. I think this week I will finish, so this week is the end of the year, and I will finish my 15th painting for the year. A little over half of those ended up going to nonprofits for auctions, which I have a passion for nonprofits, and so hadn't anticipated that as an option, but now I can donate these for auctions. I did one commissioned piece as well. So I got paid in my first year, which was pretty exciting.
That's amazing.
And given them as gifts. And so it's just been, it far exceeded my expectations in how enjoyable it was. And it helps me de-stress, and it's something that, at least while I'm doing it, is just for me. I may take the final product, and I've painted, there are several paintings out of the 15 that I did more than once. And so I'm painting through. I'm a Superman fan, obviously, and I'm painting through the Justice League. The core 5 members, and I painted Batman. Well, the reaction to Batman, there are more it's safe to say there's more Batman fans than Superman fans. I hate to have to say it, but there was a very positive reaction. Well, there's a guy here locally who I built a relationship with over the last year. And he's helped me out. I've helped him out, And so he was one of the ones that said, "Oh, this is awesome. This would look really nice in my office." Well, of course, I'm painting it for myself.
Right.
But I went ahead and painted him one as a Christmas gift as well.
Very cool.
And so now he has a Batman painting hanging in his office that I made. Holly has a painting. My designer has a painting that I've made for her because she's kind of the nerd culture. We have a lot of overlap, so she likes kind of some of that video game 8-bit.
I saw that
culture
around her desk.
Yeah. And so she has my painting of Link from Legend of Zelda as well. So it was just, but I set a goal because I said I've got to give this a fair shot,
right?
See if I really enjoy it. It also ended up costing me less to get into it than I thought it would. Now, I've certainly spent way more since then.
Right.
But my initial investment was, I think it was under $150, and that included setting my kids up to paint.
Huh.
Now, have they ended up painting as much as I have? No. They haven't.
Dad's taking it over is what it sounds like.
But if they feel like it, they can get out there and paint with me as well. And so they do enjoy that when they do it. To them, it just seems normal that Dad's painting nerd stuff, right? And so, but they don't know that most of their friends, their dads, don't do that sort of thing.
Right.
So, it was really a hey, let's kind of a system.
Right.
And what I do is I draw a grid.
Right.
I draw a grid and then I'll mock it up on the computer ahead of time and perfect it. And a lot of times, it will start out as this is exactly how it was in the video game.
Right.
And then before I paint it, I'll make certain tweaks. For example, Mario's the thing I've painted the most.
Okay.
Definitely. And so I'll paint. What I did was I took Mario. They call them sprites, which is a single frame from the animation. But I'll take a Mario sprite from Mario 3. Right. That's my personal favorite Mario game of all the ones.
Okay.
Super Mario Bros. 3. So I'll take a sprite from there, but then I'll modernize it. Because you don't realize he didn't have brown shoes back then. He had black shoes, and they're different things. And so I'll take it and modernize the sprite.
Right.
So if you looked at it, my goal is if you look at it, you're like, oh, that's Mario. And you don't even realize, don't even question certain color choices I've made that weren't like that in the original game. You just assume looking at it that that's how it was. So anyway.
Creative liberty. There
creative
it is.
liberty.
Yes,
but it's all grid-based, and I've kind of honed some different techniques and that, but the one thing is typically I can't paint a painting in one setting.
Okay.
Like Holly, who it cracks me up. She has years of experience painting. She painted one of the Superman robot paintings we have here at the office. She now comes over to my house when she wants to paint because she doesn't have the setup I do anymore. But she can paint her whole painting in one setting.
Okay, so
typically I can't because I have a clear color difference between the two colors.
Okay.
Or in a traditional painting. So there's just things like that. Right now I haven't done any classes or anything. I really want to, and I may next year, but I really wanted to firm up my own technique without letting it get colored, if you will, by a different
instructor or technique. Okay, got it.
But then next year, maybe next year or the year after, I'm actually planning on taking some classes at the Fine Arts Institute because then I'll be able to integrate it into my technique I've developed. So.
Gotcha. It's interesting stuff. Yeah, I thought that was really cool when you started doing that.
Well, thank you.
That's great stuff. We got to wrap up now, but I did want you to share with people how they can get a hold of you, the best way to get a hold of you on social media and at your website. So go ahead and share that if you would. Yeah,
sure. If I don't know you, the best way to get connected with me on social media is Twitter.
Okay.
It's not the place I'm most active, but I'm fairly selective on the other platforms about who I'll connect with. But that's Tim J. Priebe.
Okay.
Is my username. It's Tim, T-I-M, the letter J, and then Priebe is P-R-I-E-B-E.
Got it.
And so that's the best way to connect with me on social media. Certainly if someone has questions for me, I'm happy to answer those via email.
Right.
And so my email is tim@tndsgo.com.
Okay.
That's T-A-N-D, the word and spelled out, S-go.com. And so those are the best ways to connect with me. I'm happy to converse with people through email at any point. If I don't know you, sometimes and it's not an emergency, it may take a day or two to get a response back. And then I'm fairly active on Twitter. I'm not what I would call a Twitter power user by any means.
Right.
But I post on a fairly regular basis on Twitter as well. So
now, right before this, we recorded a different podcast. So you started a podcast, I don't know how long ago. If people want to listen to that podcast, how would they listen to your other podcast?
Sure. So my other podcast is specifically about online marketing. It's geared towards people in Oklahoma, although certainly anyone could get some benefit from it.
Right.
But it's called OOMPHcast, OOMPHCAST, and that stands for Oklahoma Online Marketing Power Hour Podcast. And so it's quite a mouthful if you say the whole thing. And so happened to abbreviate to OOMPHcast, or it came really close, so I did some tweaking.
Of the
so
words.
abbreviated to OOMPHcast.
Right.
Yeah, but it is not a full hour, just so you know. It may, I don't know what time we're at here. It's probably even shorter than this, because typically I'm not speaking.
Right.
I'm interviewing people, so it's a little less long-winded than this one.
We'll probably divide this one up into a part 1 and a part 2.
Okay.
But did you give the website for the other podcast?
It's oompphcast.com.
Okay, got it.
You can actually also search iTunes. We're on iTunes as well.
Okay.
Either for OOMPHcast, or I believe if you search Oklahoma Online Marketing, it'll come up.
Very good.
As well. So.
Well, man, I appreciate your time this morning. This is great. It's hopefully you can make it sometime up to the TNS offices. A lot of custom furniture, a lot of orange and blue, right? Indirectly Thunder colors.
We were actually those colors before the Thunder.
Gotcha. So, but if you're a Thunder fan, then you will like the color scheme here.
Yes.
And there's a great conference room here. And is this wooded back here? It looked like it was very natural.
It's kind of a wooded area, which is very pretty to look at, but it means we do get some wild animals around here sometimes.
Oh, no, thank you. I'm very much not about the wild animals.
We have not been interrupted by a woodpecker, but that happens from time to time as well. So.
Gotcha. Okay, well, again, thank you for your time. Hanging out with Tim has been great stuff. Like I said, if you're listening to this podcast, we're probably going to divide this up into 2 parts. And so you're listening, this is the end, so this is going to be the end of the second part. Go back and listen to the first part. And also, I'll try to get some of those websites and those books that Tim mentioned as podcast resources, either above or below this on the website. But we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Tim.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to episode 18 of the Stop Doing Nothing podcast, where we talk to Tim Priebe of TNS Online Marketing in Oklahoma City about how to start and run a successful online marketing company. If you didn't get a chance to go back and listen to part 1 or podcast 17, please be sure you do that as soon as possible. And then make sure you visit his website at tnsgo.com for some more information. Also, be sure you visit stopdoingnothing.com to get on our email list so you can get notified about new podcast episodes. And, as always, subscribe and rate the podcast on iTunes. Thank you for being a loyal listener, and we'll have a new podcast episode for you soon.